It was a cold, stormy night in the quiet town of Willow Creek. The rain beat heavily against the windows of the old Victorian house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Inside, the Thompson family had just finished their dinner and were settling down for a quiet evening. As the clock struck 9, Mr. Thompson decided to retire to his study, while Mrs. Thompson and their teenage daughter, Emily, decided to watch a movie in the living room. The atmosphere was cozy, with the warm glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. Little did they know that the storm outside wasn't the only danger lurking that night. In the shadows, just outside the perimeter of the Thompsons' home, a figure cloaked in darkness watched the family's every move. The intruder, with years of experience in robbery and a thirst for adrenaline, had been casing the house for weeks. Tonight was the night he'd chosen to strike. As the rain poured down, the intruder seized the opportunity to slip through a side door he'd noticed was left unlocked earlier that day. The relentless rain masked any noise he made as he crept through the dimly lit hallway, careful to avoid making a sound. His heart raced with excitement, anticipation growing with each step. In the living room, Emily and Mrs. Thompson were engrossed in the movie, unaware of the danger that had entered their home. The robber swiftly moved up the stairs, pausing every now and then to listen for any signs of discovery. His gloved hands tightly clutched a knife, a tool he hoped he wouldn't have to use. He made his way into the master bedroom, rifling through drawers and jewelry boxes. The glittering diamonds and pearls seemed to be an irresistible temptation. As he filled his bag with the family's valuables, a creak from the floorboards outside the bedroom door caught his attention. He froze in place, adrenaline surging through his veins. It was Emily, who had gone to use the upstairs bathroom. The robber silently cursed under his breath, knowing that he needed to act quickly before she noticed the ransacked bedroom. He hid behind the door, gripping the knife tightly, beads of sweat forming on his brow. As Emily stepped out of the bathroom, she caught a glimpse of the disarray in her parents' room. Her heart skipped a beat, and her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she edged toward the bedroom door, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. The intruder, sensing his time was running out, lunged out from behind the door, grabbing Emily and placing the cold blade of the knife against her throat. She let out a terrified scream, her wide eyes filling with tears. Hearing the scream, Mrs. Thompson sprinted up the stairs, and Mr. Thompson bolted from his study. They arrived just in time to see the intruder, their precious daughter, in his grip. Panic and fear surged through their bodies as they tried to negotiate with the man who held their child's life in his hands. Moments felt like hours as the standoff continued. The robber, realizing the gravity of the situation, began to panic. His initial plan had never included violence, but now he was cornered. In a split second, Mr. Thompson lunged at the intruder, causing him to lose his grip on Emily. She stumbled away, gasping for air, while her father grappled with the intruder. The knife clattered to the floor, and Mrs. Thompson quickly grabbed it, holding it defensively as she stood between her family and the dangerous intruder. Suddenly, the wail of sirens filled the air. The Thompsons' neighbors, having heard the commotion, had called the police. The sound of the sirens struck fear into the intruder's eyes. He knew his time was up. Desperate, he made one last attempt to flee the scene, pushing Mr. Thompson away and sprinting down the stairs. But the Thompson family was not about to let him escape without a fight. Mr. Thompson, still fueled by adrenaline, chased the intruder down the stairs, his wife and daughter following closely behind. As the robber reached the front door, he found it locked, his escape route thwarted. The police arrived just as the intruder frantically attempted to break the door down. The officers quickly apprehended him, securing him in handcuffs as he struggled in vain. The Thompson family stood together, still in shock, but grateful to be alive and unharmed. In the aftermath of the traumatic event, the family found solace in the support of their friends, neighbors, and the entire community. The strength of their bond was undeniable, and they were grateful to have emerged from the ordeal even closer than before. The intruder, on the other hand, faced the consequences of his actions. His thirst for adrenaline had led him down a dangerous path, and now he would pay the price. As he sat in his jail cell, He couldn't help but feel regret for the night he decided to break into the Thompsons' home, a decision that ultimately cost him his freedom. In the 1970s and 1980s, the state of California was terrorized by a series of home invasions and brutal crimes committed by a man who would later become known as the Night Stalker. For years, the mysterious figure left communities on edge, and his chilling actions would become one of the most infamous true crime stories in American history. The Night Stalker's reign of terror began in the mid-1970s, when a string of burglaries and sexual assaults occurred in the Sacramento area. Dubbed the East Area Rapist by the media, the attacker was notorious for his brutal modus operandi. He would enter homes through unlocked doors and windows, often while the occupants were sleeping, and he would tie up the victims before assaulting them. Throughout the late 1970s, the East Area Rapist's attacks grew increasingly violent. Reports of his crimes were enough to make even the most hardened individuals shudder in fear. As the years went on, his attacks spread across the state, reaching as far as Southern California. In 1981, the attacker became known as the original Night Stalker after a string of horrific murders. The original Night Stalker's methods had escalated beyond sexual assault. He now brutally murdered his victims, leaving their lifeless bodies for their loved ones to discover. Despite the growing body count, law enforcement struggled to find the perpetrator. The Night Stalker left few clues behind, and those that were discovered led to dead ends. As a result, his identity remained a mystery for decades. During the height of the Night Stalker's terror, communities lived in constant fear. Residents double-checked their locks, installed security systems, and held neighborhood watch meetings in an attempt to protect themselves from the predator that lurked in the shadows. Still, the Night Stalker continued to evade capture. As the years passed, the gruesome crimes began to fade from the headlines, and the investigation into the Night Stalker's identity grew cold. However, dedicated detectives never gave up their search. In the early 2000s, advances in DNA technology provided a breakthrough in the case. By comparing crime scene evidence to public genealogy databases, investigators were able to identify potential relatives of the Night Stalker. Finally, in April 2018, authorities arrested Joseph James D'Angelo, a 72-year-old former police officer, and charged him with several counts of murder. As investigators delved into D'Angelo's past, they discovered that he was also responsible for the crimes committed by the East Area Rapist. The seemingly disparate crime sprees were, in fact, the work of a single man. In June 2020, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of kidnapping, in addition to numerous other charges. He was sentenced to multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, finally bringing an end to the long, dark saga of the Night Stalker. The true story of the Night Stalker serves as a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. The terrifying reality is that the man responsible for such heinous acts was able to live among his victims for decades, undetected. While his capture brought some semblance of justice and closure to those affected by his crimes, the horrifying tale of the Night Stalker will continue to haunt the memories of Californians for generations to come.